Okay, the hypocrisy of this one is so shameless, it literally made me laugh out loud when I saw it. Fox News hosts and MAGA Republican politicians are now publicly concerned that Kamala Harris will use her power as Vice President of the United States to unilaterally change the outcome of the 2024 election, which is precisely what Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans tried to do during the last election with Mike Pence. You can't write this stuff. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, I got a couple of clips to show you here, but let's just skip right to it. So Maria Bartiromo, one of Donald Trump's closest allies at Fox and has been for years, a woman who did not care at all about Donald Trump's 2020 big lie and election shenanigans, didn't care at all about the pressure campaign that he was publicly and privately making against then Vice President Mike Pence to unilaterally change the outcome of the 2020 election. Well, now she's concerned because the Vice President of the United States is Kamala Harris, not a Republican, and so are other MAGA Republican politicians. You're going to love it. Let's play this clip and we'll unpack it together.
I've got to get your reaction to what one of your colleagues told us in the last hour, and that was Chip Roy. And we discussed the fact that as vice president, Kamala Harris is tasked with certifying the election. But what if she's the opponent of the winner? And what if she objects to the election? Here's Chip Roy in the last hour. Watch this.
The reality is we have Democrats like Jamie Raskin who have already said they have no intention of trying to make sure that we're going to see President Trump. They have no intention of counting the electorate. We have to have an overwhelming victory in the House and the Senate so that we can do the job of taking in the electors, counting the electors for President Trump. We shouldn't have the Vice President, Kamala Harris, have some sort of unilateral authority to reject the electors.
It's a good point, because at the end of the day, isn't it the Vice President that has to certify?
Yep, which is why I believe that we got to stand up and take the electors. That's what we're going to do.
I've got to get your reaction to what one of your colleagues told.
So you have a MAGA Fox News host and a MAGA Republican politician, neither of whom gave a damn about what Donald Trump tried to do in 2020. The same thing they're baselessly accusing Vice President Harris of potentially doing, or are worried that she might do. But they thought that the vice president had the power to do it when Mike Pence was the vice president. You see the staggering, shameless, naked hypocrisy. They don't care about rule of law. They don't care about institutions. They don't care about tradition. They don't care about democracy. They will say or do anything to take power. I want to remind you of what Mike Pence himself had to say about what Donald Trump wanted him to do on January 6th.
And then on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution. But I chose the Constitution, and I always will. And I really do believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States.
So, lifelong conservative Republican Mike Pence, who served as Trump's vice president, who was the target of the pressure campaign made by Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans, says explicitly Trump wanted him to unilaterally make him president, to put Trump above the Constitution, and that's why he can't endorse him. So what Republicans are concerned about is that Vice President Kamala Harris will do what they were perfectly content Trump tried to do. They are afraid that Kamala Harris will put herself above the Constitution, even as they froth at the mouth, they salivate at the idea of putting Trump above the Constitution. Interesting. If it's good for the goose, why isn't it good for the gander? We'll get into that in a second, but I also want to remind you, Mike Pence ain't in the picture anymore. Mike Pence is not Donald Trump's running mate. This loser, J.D. Vance, is. So what did J.D. Vance have to say about January 6th? And what would he have done differently if he had been Donald Trump's right-hand man then instead of Mike Pence?
But two, the reason...
He was asked to not certify it.
Sure.
So would you have certified? I'll ask you for the third
Again,
time.
I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of electors and let the country have the debate about what actually matters and what kind of an election that we had.
You wouldn't have certified,
states.
to be clear.
I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of electors.
I think
that's what.
So he would have cooperated with Trump's pressure campaign. He would have let Trump be put above the Constitution, he would have accepted fake electors and refused to certify the outcome of the election. So J.D. Vance thinks it's clearly okay. Maria Bartiromo, Chip Roy, MAGA Republicans, they thought it was okay. What's changed? What has changed? What's different? Has the vice presidency changed? Maybe it's just the party affiliation of the person occupying the role. Maybe that's what it is. As a matter of fact, we know that's what it is because during the January 6th Select Committee, the architect of this entire fake elector scheme, because someone fed this idea to Trump, John Eastman, well, he was asked about this, like, well, wait a minute. If the vice president had this sort of power, what does this mean for Democratic vice presidents, you moron? And this is what John Eastman reportedly said.
Mr. Jacob, did Dr. Eastman say whether he would want other vice presidents such as Al Gore after the 2000 election or Kamala Harris after the 2024 election to have the power to decide the outcome of the election?
So this was one of the many points that we discussed on January 5th. He had come into that meeting trying to persuade us that there was some validity to his theory. I viewed it as my objective to persuade him to acknowledge he was just wrong. And I thought this had to be one of the most powerful arguments. I mean, John, back in 2000, you weren't jumping up and saying Al Gore had this authority to do that. You would not want Kamala Harris to be able to exercise that kind of authority in 2024 when I hope Republicans will win the election. And I know you hope that too, John. And he said, absolutely. Al Gore did not have a basis to do it in 2000. Kamala Harris shouldn't be able to do it in 2024, but I think you should do it today.
Also, one prominent Democratic vice president that they didn't mention was Joe Biden. When Donald Trump won in 2016, people tend to forget this because Democratic politicians are objectively morally superior to Republican politicians, so it's just kind of baked in. But using this worldview, adopting the MAGA brain, adapting the Republican worldview, well, Joe Biden, a Democrat, was the sitting vice president of the United States, and he certified Donald Trump's victory. By their logic, if they weren't hypocrites, Joe Biden should have said, I don't like the outcome of this particular race. I'm just going to toss this. Somebody send alternative slates. We need some slates for Hillary. Give me some Hillary slates. He could have schemed with then President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. The three of them could have schemed to try to steal the election for Hillary Clinton instead of certifying the legitimate winner, Donald Trump. But they didn't do that. They didn't even think about doing that. Because again, for a few reasons, Democratic politicians are smarter. Democratic politicians operate in better faith. Democratic politicians are morally superior to their Republican counterparts. This gives the game away. Maria Bartiromo, Chip Roy, Mike Lawler, who was the Republican she was talking to at first before she did the clip over to Chip Roy, John Eastman, and MAGA Republicans. This is how you know they are all unprincipled, hypocritical losers. They don't believe that the vice president should have that power. They think that they should be able to do it whenever it's convenient for them. It's not a standard. It's not a power or authority. It's just, I just don't like this particular rule. And so I get to break it, but you can't break it. Don't you even think about breaking it. We can break it whenever we want. Don't you dare. That's why I say, one of many reasons why I say, as far as I'm concerned, there is no room in federal government for an elected Republican. Every Republican who is up for election, in my opinion, should be voted out. The world and the country would be better off if there were precisely 0 elected Republicans in the United States federal government. Because this party has been corrupted with this sort of staggering hypocrisy and stupidity, the shamelessness. I mean, it's not even a slight hypocrisy. It is just openly brazen. The people who celebrate abuse of vice presidential authority, who crave for it, who salivate for it, are now terrified the vice presidential authority might be abused, even though there's no evidence Kamala Harris would ever do that. It's projection. They know they are so corrupt and authoritarian, they would do it in a heartbeat. And they project that same sort of corruption onto the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party has its issues, and some of its members are corrupt, But by and large, Republican politicians and their collective are much more corrupt in fundamental ways compared to the Democrats. Also remind you, electiondeniers.org, it's a good website to have in your back pocket. 20 election deniers hold office in the United States Senate. 152 election deniers hold office in the United States House of Representatives. 126 sitting members of Congress, sitting members, people who have not been voted out, voted to overturn the 2020 election results. 7 election deniers are on the ballot for Senate. 173 election deniers are on the ballot for the House of Representatives. That's where we are. That's where we are. So just want to bring that to your attention. It did make me laugh when I'm stunned. The just cynicism and selective amnesia of the group that so craved this very thing are now terrified that somebody else may adopt their standard. Interesting stuff. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.